We've been doing this response and responsibility panel discussion for quite a while. Margaret is new to it, but a bunch of the other people around the table have been here for a while. So it's really just an opportunity for us in a very informal setting to talk about what we at the table are doing, what we see other people doing, opportunities that are out there, things that we wish we could change, things that we think that we might be able to change. And it's just it's a great chance for everyone just to trade ideas and to find out what everybody else is doing and figure out what might work in the near future, midterm, and maybe even the long-term future. So usually what I like to do is just start out and everybody just talk a little bit about maybe like one project that you're working on that you think other architects might be able to learn a little bit from. And it could be an international project or it could even be a domestic project, but something that you think has some lessons that a wider audience might actually learn something from. So Bill, you want to talk about maybe Benin?
I've been working in Benin for the last 5 years for the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is one of the U.S. foreign assistance programs. I've got $38 million, and I've been...
Is that your fee?
No, that's my budget. I've got surveyors out both in rural areas and in the urban areas, mostly in Cotonou, which is the main city along the coast. Benin is the small, skinny little country that's right next to Nigeria, on the western side of Nigeria. It's in between Nigeria and Togo. And Niger is up north. Basically taking a 2,000-year-old oral customary system of land rights and attempting to transform it into something that's mapped and written down. The rural is going quite nicely at this point, and, mostly because the methodology that we're using is one that the Beninese came up with themselves. It's a fairly simple and it's a census-taking process that sits peasants down around the table, asks them to draw a map of their village, and then moves from there into a more elaborate and sophisticated look at the layers of land rights that are associated. In the cities, a little more complicated, a little less successful, both basically because the French left behind a French civil law system of property rights and attempting to transform the actual activity that people use in terms of their transactions into this sort of artificial French colonial system. So I'm expecting not too much useful stuff coming out of that piece of the project. Anyway, we're reaching the last year, and it's the major problem that's been posed, and is one that's sort of universal, is whether transforming property rights in urban neighborhoods really matters in terms of giving people more security. The theory is that you give people more tenure security, they invest more, they pay their taxes more, they manage more, and then the neighborhood, is able to develop and strengthen and get infrastructure in. And not clear that we're having that impact in Benin. So we'll be watching. My evaluation report will be out probably at the end of the year, and looking at that set of questions.
Now, in Benin, in the city, is most of the land sort of family owned? Are there commercial landlords, or?
All of the African cities, particularly French African cities, had a core of land that historically under the colonial regime, basically the colonial administration took out of the old customary land rights system and created a sort of a little French city, applied French civil law and set up land books and registries and so on. But of course, as the cities have expanded beyond that little core, they've gotten into the area where the lineage of historic families and clans that held the land under these ancient oral rights started to become occupied and settled and subdivided, etc. So we have an interesting situation in where the that identify with that land. And then you've got all the land been cut up into 350 square meter little plots. People build their little house on and put a wall around it. And it's generally one household per one plot, although it gets a little more complicated, but generally that's the pattern. And so consequently, what ends up happening if you've got a project that's any bigger, you've got commercial or some kind of a real investment, or some kind of a state project that needs to get done, a school or a public facility, you have to reconsolidate all of these little pieces, which have this double layer of sort of, the rights of the settlers who are on that, which have these sort of ancient rights that are still sort of residual, et cetera. And so consequently, it's a fascinating sort of a dilemma that's presented to anybody who wants to do anything that's sort of bigger than a one-family house.
Bill, what happens to you're building a school, so you have to do all of this consolidation or this negotiation with how you're going to get that land to do that. Where do you get the rest of the land that doesn't encroach on somebody else's?
Yeah, interesting. What happens is the state comes in and sort of rearranges everybody.
Hello, Alfonso. Excuse me. I'm just dialing in.
Oh, is Alfonso here?
Right?
Yeah.
We're connecting to Columbia.
No, we're connecting to Cambridge.
Cambridge, Columbia, okay.
First things first.
They're both post-socialist.
He's our Colombian contact. I think he's probably there because he's acting as sort of network chief for Colombia. Alfonso is Duncan Pendlebury's design partner.
Okay.
Alfonso, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, good. I was introducing you, Alfonso, but do please introduce yourself.
Alfonso, would you mind taking your sunglasses off?
So, should we go around and let Alfonso know who's here?
Sure.
Sure.
So, well, this is Ann Feynman, BSA Deputy Director.
And Pat Moss with Franco Alexander Associates, and member of the International Committee.
Charles Rose Architects.
Tom Adams, Real Life Productions.
Melissa Gransberg, U.S. Commercial Service.
Cliff Pearson, moderator. I'm an editor at Architectural Record.
Stell Jackson, and you know me.
I'm Margaret Wigglesworth. I'm the new director at the BSA.
Bill Valletta, I'm an urban planner, sole practitioner.
And Bill was just telling us about his work in Benin.
Yes.
You're the new director?
Alfonso, were you able to connect with any of the Colombians? Other than yourself, of course?
Not really.
We'll get them in November.
Okay.
Alfonso, where are you? Are you in Bogota or what?
I don't know. I'm here in Boston.
Oh, okay.
Boston or Cambridge?
Watertown.
Watertown, okay. Exotic Watertown. So when we talk about international practice, we're talking about Boston via Watertown.
Well, what we're doing is actually, I think it's good that Alfonso's here, and it would be lovely if we had some of the other Colombians on the network, but at least we can see how this works to start with. And Alfonso, Tom Adams does a lot of work with the Lincoln Institute and the production of networks. Basically, Tom can tell you exactly what he does. But Tom was helping us set up the network for the Skype architect-to-architect project. So if we have any problems, if you're having problems with that, you can tell us how it works on your end of Skype, and we can tell you how it works here for us.
How's the audio? Can you hear us clearly?
Yeah, it's at the moment it goes away a little bit. It's here for a moment, and then it kind of fades
Okay.
as the conversation progresses.
Good to know.
So we should speak up. Would that help?
Yeah, I don't know, I assume so.
Okay, anyway, Bill was telling us a little bit about some of the work that he's doing in Benin with land rights. Well, Margaret, why don't you tell us a little bit about, I mean, you've been at the BSA for all of 2 months now.
I have. We're pretty focused at the moment on our build out at Atlantic Wharf and some of the pent up demand for sort of decision making, just based on the absence of very predictable leadership over the last 3 years or so. So, but really, we're using 2011 to get this building sold, get the build out at Atlantic Wharf underway and completed by. Our goal actually is to move the week before Build Boston.
Okay.
You could make it just a little bit more stressful if you did it the week of.
Well, our thinking is not as outrageous as you might guess. We figure if we move the Friday before Build Boston, we have the entire week of Build Boston where we can break into 2 teams, the team that goes to Build Boston and the team that stays and unpacks. And the week after that is Thanksgiving. We could remain closed that week as well and finish the job so that after Thanksgiving we're really up and running in a big way. We've got not only office space but a fairly sizable gallery. And so we're engaging guest curators, and we've got we've had our initial meetings about what those first exhibits are going to be. So it's very exciting time for us.
Can you give us a little sneak preview of what some of those exhibitions might be?
We're not down to the short list yet. I can tell you that our first guest curator is going to be Pink Comma, and our gallery space
And what is Pink Comma?
Pink Comma is it's a design firm that also has a gallery.
The design firm is over, under, and Pink Comma is their gallery. Mark Pasnick, Chris Grimley, and Michael. What's Michael's last name? Do you remember?
I never can remember.
But they're here in Boston.
So, and they've got some great ideas. The layout of the space lends itself to essentially 3 distinct areas. Although they're contiguous with one another, they're broken up by conference rooms or something. So we're looking at programming this in 3 distinct ways and keeping in mind, emerging architects, 3-dimensional exhibits. It will be the dead of winter, and what kind of series can we run to bring people into the space? We also have ground.
It's all on one floor?
It's on one floor. We have ground floor space that's smaller as an entryway off the street, and that will have a concierge service and a little bit of gallery space, some retail, mostly books and things like that. And we're partnering at the moment. Our 2 initial partners are Boston by Foot and Boston by Boat. So that ground floor space will be used both as an entry point for the BSA, but also in concert with those 2 partners. So, and then you ascend this beautiful staircase and arrive in a gallery, and the staff offices are off to the side of that.
So who designed the space?
A firm, a pair of young architects, Howler and Yoon.
Oh, okay.
Eric Howler and
Know
Regin
those
Yoon.
guys. Good.
And we're hoping that in the not too distant future, they'll actually start swinging hammers down there. And
Uh-huh.
we'll be able to move in mid-November.
And what's been there? What was there before?
It's actually a fit out of renovated space. It's a low wharf industrial building that's been gutted and renovated, and then a tower built on top of it. It's at 290 Congress, and that's where, for instance, the new Payette office is. Right next to the new Intercontinental Hotel. So, and there's some good synergy there. I think it's an up and coming area on the Greenway. The Children's Museum is directly across Fort Point Channel from us, and so I think it's a great spot.
Being on the ground floor makes me think of the Philadelphia chapter's rather large retail store that really appeals to the public, and it's a full-size store. You can do most of your Christmas shopping there, or holiday shopping. Any thoughts of expanding the retail end of things?
We don't, we have room to expand a bit. We are confined a little bit by the footprint of the space. And I think that the retail aspect, as well as other aspects of this quantum leap forward for the BSA, is something that we're going to have to just live into and see how this develops. So we're it's a very exciting time for us, but rather busy. In a good way.
What do we do? I must applaud you. I actually contacted the chairs of the committees by a handwritten note. I nearly died of shock when it was
I had lots of help with that.
Did you? Well, whoever wrote it, I got it, and it was wonderful. And the same day, I got an offer from a Taiwanese architect, a big one involved with Genzyme, who's coming in to do a major feature here. As you know, they're dealing with Harvard and a few other things. Who wants to do a program in November, which is a horror time, when this Taiwanese architect, the leader of the whole thing, is going to be here. So what do I do with a delegation of Chinese coming in for that particular time? Do I take them to Build Boston?
Yes. You take them to Build Boston. We've got a lot of moving parts in November and
That's
December.
why I'm asking here now.
And the substance of my note was that we made the decision that we're going to not hold meetings here in November and December. This building is on the market. It's had a lot of interest. We've got a couple of offers. The offers will, the first round will be finished on Wednesday. So we need the back-end flexibility for someone who wants to take possession of the building this year. We start paying rent at Atlantic Wharf November 1st. So we really need the flexibility in those 60 days to have our move date go beyond Build Boston into December and not be disrupting your life and lend some predictability to committees in general. So my best advice to you is to take them to Build Boston.
Yeah, Build Boston is kind of the one absolute definite thing.
That's about the only definite thing. That Thanksgiving.
That's what I thought. This one I could have put off, except for the fact that this man's coming in from Taiwan, and he's coming in for meetings with Harvard, as well as the entire Alston campus is under discussion at the moment. And this is one of the major players because, as you know, Genzyme rents land from Harvard, where there is now, and to expand it into that whole joint meeting. Pat probably knows more about this than I do, but no, there's it's kind of a fascinating time. So I'm not going to snub this guy, especially.
Oh no! And Build Boston can easily accommodate something like that.
Okay. We
We just can't predictably. It may be that we would still be here when they were here, but
no, it's not a problem.
it's just not predictable.
No. It's not that. It's just that I thought you're here and you're going to do this in front of witnesses.
Yeah.
But it came at just at a crazy time.
Yeah.
Your note came in this call came. This is Ben Wang, his firm is the one that's working with them. As you know, they work with Genzyme anyhow. And Ben's you've probably met Ben, but. Estelle, can you do this for the internet? Get the international committee to do this? I said, sure, Ben. Let me know. Oh God, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
But
One
we'll
of
just get
those.
it over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing.
Good. Sounds like you're having fun.
I'm having a great time. I am. It's been really fun.
I told Margaret if she could survive religious politics and church politics, she could survive the BSA. So we have great hopes for her.
And at least the architects don't usually turn to a higher source.
Right.
Well, you've never heard of Le Corbusier?
I know. This is Boston. Or Gropius.
Right.
Would you want to talk, Estelle,
mine?
one of your international projects?
Well, my international, everyone knows that I've been doing this Vietnam thing. The trouble is, in my London office, we were right in the middle of a major crisis with a European client who we cannot talk about. If you can talk about it, you know exactly what kind of a crazy crisis we're in. But the one I can talk about is in Vietnam. In Vietnam, we're having exactly the same kind of problem right now because they're almost to the point of a shooting war with China. They actually are, I think, at the point now. They have the China Sea is being, China wants to take over the China Sea, the whole sea. And it's crazy. When Vietnam negotiated for their border, they had to have a firm border before they become members of the World Trade Organization. So they ended up having to cede Haiphong Harbor for 20 years. And now the Chinese want, Da Nang. They want Da Nang because Da Nang is the best deep water port on the entire coast. And as you know, a lot of the development in Vietnam has been going on around that area because it's the center of the country and a lot of then that particular China Beach area. But my project's at Hue, which is the we actually advise the development for the entire country, but my particular project's in Hue, which is the capital of the military province. And what we're doing is developing a project very similar to what Harvard's doing in Alston with the university and bringing that entire old historical and intellectual capital of Vietnam to life, because it hasn't been, and they've just sort of kept it that way as a historical site, pretty much. But it's a beautiful, absolutely incredible, and Vietnam is extremely important because it's the other side of the Pacific to California. And the two parentheses, it's a major, important area, and it actually plays a very similar role to California with the United States. California's sort of out on that coast, and Vietnam is the same way on the coast for the other. But there, of course, are problems now with the currencies are going crazy. Is the China bubble going to burst? When is the China bubble going to burst? They're pulling back. They're still trying to keep up this elaborate charade of development. And when's the India one going to break? When is the China one going to break? What's happening? What's the development of the entire southern Silk Route, which is basically China down the coast into Africa and into Latin America? You have this elaborate, pretty much economic invasion of Africa and Latin America by China. Now, what role is that going to play? How is that going to affect us? And they've gotten into Brazil. A great number of things are into Brazil. And Brazil, we had a video conference with Brazil a couple of years ago, and they told us more or less that no, we really don't want American architects down there unless you're ready to take a sub role with the Brazilians. And it's because of the World Cup and the Olympics down there. There's a lot of high level architecture going on, and that's why I decided to focus, instead of focusing on China and India and the areas that most people are focusing on right now, I decided to focus on Latin America and develop an architect-to-architect relationship with Latin America, particularly Colombia now, because we have a good number of really bright Colombian architects here. And also in Colombia, as you know from the Lincoln Institute, Tom, we've had some absolutely fantastic things that have come out. The redevelopment of both political and economic, Bogota and what's the other one? I can never remember it. The one that was the drug capital. Medellin. But the architecture and the role of architects and planners more or less changed. The evolution came that way. It wasn't political. It wasn't military. It was actually came with the people through the thing, and architects generated this wonderful thing. Like one of the men we were supposed to have, Gianfranco Rodriguez today, but he's going through one of these Steve Hull periods where he's hit the superstar level at the moment, and he's trying to just keep writing that.
Gianfranco Mazzanti.
Yeah, is it Gianfranco Mazzanti? There's another Rodriguez here today too. So I'm sorry, forgive me, people. But the thing is that his library in one of the slum areas has completely changed that whole city, that whole orientation of that whole city, and the idea of how people are reacting, how people are being affected by that, and the enormous pride they have in this one library. That's fabulous. And so this is why Columbia is fascinating, because architects and planners have done this. And the Lincoln Institute has done a lot of work with them. And I'm hoping to have them involved in November as much as we can. But they do, Tom, didn't you film something that deals with this?
I was trying to remember the speaker. I'd have to dig back into the
There's a
archives.
woman who was
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago.
No, it was very, but it's, you can go on to the Lincoln Institute for Land Policy website and bring up their, the webinar for on Columbia. And it's absolutely fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how, with planners basically. And now the architects, we're adding that layer that the Lincoln didn't add to. We're adding the layer of the Columbian architects to it. But setting up this project with Latin America, I think is very important. They're at our back door. We have to, they're a major population in the United States. We need the contact with the Latin architects. We need an interactive one. And by having a system where we can communicate with them very easily by Skype, or because Skype, everybody can afford, it costs nothing. And we deal with it that way. But that sets it up in a personal one. You're sitting in the room, you're talking to the same people. I mean, even if Alfonso is sitting there behind his sunglasses, we still know he's there.
Yeah. At least he was there.
But I think it's fascinating to do something like that. This is very, very simple, very seat of the pants, very easy to do. And I was talking to Ricardo Legoretta, what was it, around 2 weeks ago, I think, right after Charles told me that Ricardo was sick, and Ricardo denies he's sick. But that's good. I gave me a chance to talk to Ricardo. But he and I worked on a project with Televisa in Mexico years ago, and we used television there as a way of dealing with the population, finding out how people would react to an urban move after they've lived in an agrarian population, and how they could make that transition. So you use television as a vehicle. You show people what these other lifestyles are like, and what is actually in this other population where they're going. And even if you do get them hooked on soap operas, which I'm afraid we did, it's a way of learning. So but our whole problem was that this was Televisa. It was also for Miguel de la Madrid, who was the president of Mexico at the time, who wanted to urbanize and wanted to develop, but he didn't want to start a revolution. And that by doing that, my job was to go in and find out how the people would react, and then put a physical reality on that, the reaction, so the transition could work. And this is where architecture played a very large role. But this is also the genesis of exactly what we're doing with this Skype project right now. Okay, Cliff?
Well, what's fascinating, just with Columbia, our magazine has covered a bunch of projects there. And you look at Medellin, and 10 years ago, 12 years ago, in Medellin, I mean, it was a total basket case. Essentially, the authorities ceded control of almost the entire city to the drug gangs. Pablo Escobar basically was the ruler of Medellin, and the police, the government, literally had no presence in most parts of the city. And after Escobar was killed, and the gangs were basically dismantled, the government realized that they had to go into the city, but they had to do it in a very strategic way. They had limited resources, limited amount of money, and they were very smart. They identified particular places where they could do one library, one school, one sports facility, and insert these basically smallish to medium-sized projects that would have a big impact. And I told the story to a couple of people here. One of these libraries in the favela, we all fell in love with the photographs. But I had wondered how the local people actually were responding to the building, because it was not a traditional library at all. It was a pretty remarkable, modern, sculptural building. And our managing editor went down to write about it, and I asked her what it was like, how people in the neighborhood felt. And she told the story of walking towards the library with the architect John Franco Mazzanti, and all the kids in the neighborhood came up to them and said, "You want for us to show you our library?" And they were so excited. And the kids really knew a lot about the building. They didn't know that the guy there was the architect of the building, but they were pointing things out to him. And then when they told the kids that here's the man who actually designed the building, literally he was surrounded. The entire favela came out, and he was treated like a rock star, like like a soccer celebrity. But it shows how architecture can have an impact on people. But you have to be very strategic. You have to sort of find the pressure points where architecture can have the biggest impact. And that's tricky to do.
Has anybody looked at the process, the strategic process? Now, we in the international foreign aid business are constantly faced with the dilemma of how you go into a country or a city or urban area or whatever, and construct a process by which you can then identify the strategic places.
I don't know exactly the process, but I know that actually there was a project in that same favela before the library.
Yep.
The original problem was just getting access to the neighborhood because the streets weren't very good. The streets basically hadn't been paved or dealt with in 20 or 30 years. It was a steep hill.
Yeah.
And they realized that they needed some form of mass transit. They had to connect this neighborhood with the rest of Medellin. They didn't have the money to build the subway or anything like that, and that would take way too long and be way too disruptive. So what they ended up building, which is sort of brilliant, was basically a chairlift. And the chairlift became the main form of mass transit. And it was very quick. Technology was there. In terms of taking over land, they only needed a few spots. And that immediately connected the neighborhood with the rest of the city, which started changing the whole dynamic of who goes there, the economics of the situation. And then after that, they went in and built this library. And the library became a physical manifestation of the government's concern for the people who lived in this neighborhood.
But presumably somebody in the government or in the planning apparatus at the beginning of this had enough contact and enough knowledge of what this neighborhood was all about to be able to articulate that in some meaningful kind of a way.
Right.
This is what we're
The problem we always run into is, we go into a country like Benin, and you're dealing with various people at ministries and various people who are, members of the intellectual elite, and they haven't got a clue.
They're the last people who would know what is really needed.
What's going on in this neighborhood? Well, this, and this, and it's all wrong.
Well, this is exactly what we're hoping to find out and do in the workshop at Bill Boston. This is what we need your people. We don't have the Colombian embassy or our embassy in Colombia working with us today because there's a huge thing going on at the same time that deals with the trade agreement we're having between the United States and Colombia at the moment. And so any day except today would have just about been it. You know how it goes. But we're hoping to find out this particular kind of information. And with our people talking to the architects and planners and the government down there, I will be able to find out exactly how this mechanism worked there and therefore can be used as a prototype for a country like Benin. But it's basically architects, because of our glamour and the physical things that we drop the parachute in, which I object to thoroughly, but anyhow, as we drop in, then they know we're there, and they call us because they need some sort of monumental marker for the new regime, the new government, their new whatever.
I mean, certainly the history of modern architecture is filled with examples people with the best of intentions and with budgets and doing the wrong thing. Either building the right building in the wrong place or the wrong building in the right place, or not getting people in the neighborhood engaged or involved. I don't know how they did it there, but whatever they did, it seems like it's working pretty well.
Hopefully that means that there was a planner or an architect somewhere in the government who knew about us.
Well, and that's the ultimate sign of success, right? And when it's integrated into the local atmosphere.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, I mean,
When the local kids talk about our library,
Yeah,
It's huge.
yeah.
Melissa,
Yes, Melissa. This is
Tell
her
us a little
first
bit about
introduction to
Yes.
the.
what you're working on.
Well, I work with the U.S. Commercial Service, so we actually operate all the commercial sections of the embassies and consulates worldwide. So we're in 80 countries, 150 offices. So this kind of thing is something that we could actually help with. There's a lot of information about culture, economics, politics, government, that kind of thing. So we provide that free. It's online at our website, export.gov.
Now, how often are those reports updated?
These are yearly. Those reports are yearly. The one about airports, that might not necessarily be yearly. It says the need is. Other types of things that we offer on our website is actually other trade leads. I know we're talking about Columbia here, but I did find some examples of just other related examples of what we can provide. I could pass that around. If you're interested, let me know.
Around that way.
That way?
Yeah.
Go that way. If you're interested in any more information, certainly let me know, and I can provide that by email.
Great.
Probably one of the other things that we can do besides the market research is help you find partners overseas through meetings, in-country meetings, and advocacy. So if you have trouble with any sort of government tender, things like that, we can provide advocacy for U.S. companies specifically.
Now, do you work mostly with professional services, companies, firms?
We
Or
actually
do you have a geographic
we're
focus?
geographic. In Massachusetts, there's 5 of us who cover the state. Jim Paul is usually here in this seat. He covers companies in Boston, which is why he'd be here, and organizations. I cover kind of a weird area just north of Boston, Waltham, Sudbury, out to Revere.
But all kinds of American companies.
Everything that exists in that area. I specifically, industry specific on information communication technology, which is a little bit outside the scope of this room, but we're mostly geographic, and we can help in any way. It's the people overseas who are actually specific, have the specific knowledge about the country. So the people overseas have been in the building sector, for example, for forever. They know the contacts in the ministry. They know all the way down to the people who are actually building the buildings. They know who they are because they've been there in the industry for a number of years. One example is one guy in Mexico, I believe. He's been there for over 50 years working for us, so he definitely knows everybody. He can call up the government. He's got him on speed dial. So
Thank you.
it's good to have that.
The contacts are wonderful. I can give you a perfect example in Vietnam. Jim and I did a conference call with the embassy in Vietnam, and all of us, it was a very long and very involved one. It was very, very good. And several of the Vietnamese officials finally believed the thing was a reality because it came through the embassy channels, and the credibility was there, and it really worked. But we've been working with the DOC now for 12 years, and very, very carefully and and I think very well. It's been a nice interactive one because they've learned who architects are and the role we really play. And what Cliff was just describing is exactly the thing that we're often called in to do. And how do we, instead of just dumping something there, how do we integrate it? And that's where the DOC and the International Trade Administration, which is between the DOC and the State Department, comes in very, very handy. But it's good. We've developed over the years. They thought we were just sort of glamorous creatures that one didn't really need to pay attention to, into a real partner. And I think it's very good. But with Jim and now with Melissa on board and Jim Cox, who is the regional director, Jim's terrific. And Jim has come up with a new idea that I think is great, and it's something we want to do, and it'll make the International Trade Administration happy. It's the products that often are developed on site by architects. And I mean, you know, your wife is a planner, Tom, so we're in this thing too. But architects often develop things by sheer innovation, because you've got to do it, you've got to make something work, because you can't sell an American product if it's not going to work. And you've got to make it work. But if you can, then that invention, that it belongs to you. And so you should benefit from it. And this is what Mark Kalin and Jim Cox and Billy now with the Build Boston, we're trying to work together on that to develop a product development thing where the architect is introduced to a manufacturer, and the two of them can work together. The architect can earn some money for this thing, but also an American product can learn and be useful and can be transferred into another culture, and we can make it work. I mean, so often our products are not being used because they don't fit, or they're not glamorous, or something like this. You get these elaborate designs from Italy or someplace like that, and they think, oh, it's glamorous, we're going to do it. But now it's getting to the point where the product is being designed to suit a particular site. I mean, it's a mundane kind of thing, but there was a big article in one of the papers, I don't remember which one it was, that dealt with toilet design and how it's being generated from China.
Yep.
And it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm talking about.
And these toilets, I think they're going to catch on.
Wait, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah.
What I mean, just
What the exact
not
question
wishing to
is.
prolong it, but what are you talking about?
No, but seriously, it's just one example, but it's a vivid example, and so therefore I think that's why
She's in denial.
it's picked up on. But that's what we're talking about. If we can do that and we can make it work. Like in Vietnam, I've got some guys, a team out there that is actually working on products that will work into a rehabilitation hospital. Now, how do you do this? And how do you get it manufactured over there? But using our technology and using us as much as possible, but involving them as much as possible too, so that it's theirs as well as ours. But we're friends. We're working together. And it's terrific. It's just like the guys were complimenting me on my costume, which is designed by an Iranian English designer. And he has established a working relationship with some of his tradespeople, the craftsmen who actually work with him, that they develop something, he will market it, he'll bring it and market it, and then they get the benefit from it. But he gets the benefit from their expertise in knitting or whatever it happens to be, or furniture making. But that's what you do. It's a trade-off. And hopefully we can do this about American products and make it work. But that'll make the trade development, the International Trade Administration thing that we really do consider trade as well, the widget part of trade as well as the
key issue appears, at least from the reading that I've done, and also from a little bit of experience that I've had on the ground. Our technology tends to be difficult to adapt to produce the kind of products that are needed and wanted, particularly from the standpoint that our technology and our manufacturing systems tend to want to add value and tend to move toward the higher value final product. Whereas, in most parts of these developing countries, the market is for cheap things. The $2,000 car, not the $28,000 car. And it's the difficulty of taking a car making process out of Detroit and producing a $2,000 car with it. That's what's going to sell in India and lots of other places. That's the big dilemma. And when you're on the ground in any one of these countries and you're trying to sort of adapt process, I asked the question about the planning. In Africa, in our foreign aid, we're using a model of theory, based on Hernando de Soto and housing finance and housing and construction and you know, the theory of how people react in terms of their relationship to land as owners and property as owners, et cetera, that's 15 years old at this point, the theory is. And it appears that in Latin America themselves, which is where all this was, the theory was generated out of and grew out of their experience, well, they've sort of moved beyond that at this point and are doing much more interesting things, like these libraries, as sort of the catalyst of a neighborhood renewal, rather than formalization of land titles as a spur for renewal. And you know, at this point, our planning, you know, based on the systems we've been using for the past 10, 15 years, hasn't caught up and is not, in my estimation, producing the product that's really useful at this point. So I don't know whether that makes sense, but.
Tom, I mean, you're at the Lincoln Institute, so you get to see a
Well, I
lot
wouldn't
of
go that
different
far,
stuff
yeah,
that's
yeah.
happening there.
Yeah.
What exactly is your role there?
Well, I'm an independent producer. You know,
Okay.
I do video production. That's my business. But I am interested in all that's being said. I'm taking it all in, and you know, I try to align myself with organizations that do interesting work and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I'm really enjoying just kind of taking it all in. And,
You're a planner by marriage.
but exactly, that's right. Yep, my wife was a student of John Mullen, you know, from UMass Amherst. So, and so I've lived in that world for all this time. So, and, you know, if I didn't get a degree in communications, that would be probably my second one. So it's all interesting to me.
Charles.
I never quite know what to talk about, and I'm even more confused these days because we're working with a consultant who's telling me what to do. But you know, I've come to this now a number of years, and we still do very little internationally, if anything. I don't think we have anything right now. But we have come off a major run. I was talking to Cliff, we've just finished probably 5 or 6 different universities, build new landscapes, buildings, whatever, pieces of universities, and
All over the country, too.
all over the country. And we're
Sometimes can seem like foreign places.
You cross the Charles.
we're not going there. And we do a lot of work for governments too. So we have design excellent contracts with the federal government. We have design excellent contracts with the city of New York. But it's been gradually this workload. The numbers are changing. The amount of work out there is a disaster. And at the moment, I'm looking at an office where we still do high-end homes, which pays a lot of bills. So, you know, we still have our rock stars and musicians and things that we service. But we've got one building, which actually I just saw in this magazine, Architecture Boston, where this is on page 33. We have an intermodal transit center for the FTA, which is also ARRA funding. And that's been kind of interesting. It's a net zero building, so it makes more energy using alternative methods than it uses over the course of the year. And it's got a Buy America clause. It's got all that kind of great what's left of ARRA working with it. So there's that project. We're also doing a net zero office building for the federal government right now. Same deal. It's about 60,000 feet, but also net zero. We like these sorts of projects, but it's pretty interesting because the funding sources for both of those projects are gone. You know, the GSA, I don't think has a single building. You'll see the RFPs, but I was down in Washington a few weeks ago, and they don't have a dollar going into new construction this year. Not a dollar. New York City, there hasn't been an RFP in more than a year now. all these ARRA is gone. Never seemed to do all that much architecturally. So it's been kind of interesting. It's just for opportunity's sake, it's forcing us to think internationally.
So how do you go about that?
Well, I was actually sitting here thinking, and I can say this because you're no, thank you. I was sitting here thinking, what can the BSA do for me? Which is a radical idea. Because really, so much of what is going on isn't all that interesting to me anymore. It's like, there was a design project to do something on a barge or something, and I was having trouble finding the relevance. And, I think there was a time when this city exported so much design to the world. I mean, probably more than any other city in the country, we were the city that exported design. And we're just, we're not doing that anymore.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. I think the competition is brutal for other parts of the world. I think that's part of it. But I also just don't know if we have, I don't think our culture, the architectural culture here probably has caught up to the realities of the economic situation. I was telling Cliff, we recently were involved with a very small $16 million museum at a college. This is the kind of stuff we go after routinely. This was the project down at Virginia Commonwealth University, to which I think there was more than 60 or 70 teams went after this from around the world, Europe, everywhere, which is ridiculous. I mean, the numbers, if you face the facts that it is a numbers game, that's a problem. So I think it's becoming really important for BSA to be thinking about how you take care of the many architects we have here and getting them connected, whether it's with, USAID, Paul Farmer, Partners in Health, they're building a bunch of hospitals, or, how do you really get us out and connected? I think is really important because there's just not much happening here. I have people in the office who they track leads. I mean, everyone has that, and the big joke now is all these lead services are stuffing their weekly updates with like projects for artists, projects for new websites, and there'll be one architectural project in there, and then you get in the fine print, and it's not even a sure thing, and nothing's getting funded, and yet we have tremendous talent here. We have, I look at my office, and they all come from Harvard, and they. I could never get a job at my office, all the kind of stuff they know how to do, and I never hire myself. Well, I also have a bad attitude, but that's another thing. But the amount of real expertise we have here. I mean, I'd be curious to know, if you look at our little organization, the BSA organization, how many what are they, degrees? I don't know what they are, but lead AP. How many do we have? And first of all, we all have to, just in Massachusetts, meet pretty tight energy standards right now. I don't know if not every town has adopted that new code.
The green communities.
The green community. But, we really have a lot of knowledge. A lot of people have gone to very good colleges, and we got to figure out a way to export it, or we're going to have half the architects we have living here 10 years from now. So that's one of the reasons I'm here today, is just we're very interested, how do you get in there? How do you get work? Does it all have to be these competitions with 600 other entries, or, how can we really angle it?
How many different countries do you have employees from?
We have, it's interesting you say that, we probably 4 right now, but that's a real interest because we think we've got to bring in the language skills, and all the new hires, we're looking hard at what although there are not a lot of new hires right now. So
there's I've heard the same story from a lot of different architects, which is You know, we had this kid from Harvard who came from China, worked for us for a year and a half, went back to China. 5 years later, we get a phone call from this kid who's now working for his family's development company, and they're doing a 50-story building in Tianjin. You know, would we be interested? And, you know, that's a great connection because they know you, you know.
Well, I always try to find out the net worth of future employees.
Sometimes you don't know. I mean, I think Paul Katz at KPF told me this story, and they had some big Korean developer, you know, came into their office and had this meeting with like these 5 Koreans came in, with this, you know, very powerful, wealthy chaebol or whatever, and all of a sudden they realized that they needed someone to translate. So Paul says, do we have anybody here in the New York office who can speak Korean? And they search around, there's like some intern who they just hired like a month ago, and who's Korean. And, okay, bring him up!
Suddenly he's a project architect.
And nobody even knew who this kid was. And I guess the kid had just gotten his business cards, and comes into this room with all these very powerful men and gives them his business card, and the men look at it, and all of a sudden they literally started bowing. This kid came from the royal family of Korea, and they could tell by looking at his name. And literally, it was like, and Paul said, "What the hell is going on here?"
He's a senior partner now. Right?
So you never really know.
No.
And the great thing about Boston, with all the universities, you get students from the entire world.
It's really true, yeah.
And, you know, you can't really say, okay, we're going to hire people specifically because they come from different countries. You want people with skills.
Right.
But it's a great resource that a place like Boston
Yeah,
has.
but I think one of the problems now, though, since 9/11, is the visa situation has gotten much stricter. And we used to automatically jump in and help students that are either they're coming from abroad or they've been to university here, and their visa would allow them, if you went through the right process, to stay a certain amount of time. And it's really difficult. First of all, there were quotas, and it's really difficult to get through that process now. So we probably have a half or a third as many internationally connected students, employees, as we had 10 years ago.
I mean, is that something that the BSA could work on, you know, as a sort of lobbying effort? I mean, it's probably more of the AIA, you know, it's
terms of the
The
national.
visa issue is very, very
Yeah.
ticklish right now. But I think an argument can be made that, you know, in today's business world, language skills are hugely important. And especially if you can hire native speakers. You know, in some of the firms I've visited and the committee meetings I've attended, there's a ton of work going on in the Middle East, and it just is difficult if you don't have some sort of presence there or ability to participate in the language.
And one of the strengths of America has been over the last 50 years is that the smartest students all over the world want to come here and study. And it's a really horrifying phenomenon that we're turning a lot of these brilliant students away. I mean, these are the people who come here. A lot of times they end up staying here for the rest of their lives, creating companies, you know, doing amazing research. Or even if they go back to their home countries, they have made connections here that, you know, are incredibly useful for Americans.
But if there's nowhere for them to go now, I mean, you know, China, the amount of work going on is mammoth.
Yeah, you know, to me, I think if you're strategic planning at this point, you've got to assume that that situation is no longer the case. And that your strategic
foreign
scenario
students
has
don't want to
be
come here?
some-
Yeah.
Pardon?
That foreign students don't want to come here.
Yeah, the wave of the future is that, in fact, it's much more attractive in lots of other places.
But I think
And you know, to the extent that we can work to to continue to hold our position and to ensure that there is a flow of talent coming back and forth, yes.
Because I think
But
that's essential to the future of
argue-
America, is maintaining.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've lost some of our edge in terms of higher education, but I think people still all over the world want to study at Harvard and Yale and Stanford. And it's, I think, essential to the security, literally the economic and even military security of the United States of America, to make sure that the smartest students around the world want to come here for their, at least for their higher
Yeah.
education.
But we're going to have to scramble to continue to.
Yeah, 'cause there's
to
competition
that
now.
to be the case. I think, Charles, you said you just finished a whole series of university campuses around the country. Now, I assume that since they're at the end, they were, the designs and the concept, they were designed and, for 5 years ago economy.
Exactly.
We were just
Exactly.
talking earlier, before we started here, the cost of higher education and the fact that, colleges are so expensive, et cetera.
I didn't say I believe in higher education.
I would again pose the same problem. Given what you've learned having done a whole series of campuses, if I came to you tomorrow and said, we've got the opportunity to work on the University of Abomey Calavi, which is the major university in Benin, which in fact may be an opportunity in a very short period of time. It's a university that, it's got to educate, Beninese students at a level that's probably 5% cost per student as to what an
Over here,
American
yeah.
university would do. 10 years ago, I did some work for the Aga Khan Foundation, and they were building a series of campuses around the Central Asia. And of course, because it was Aga Khan and because it was, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, these were luxurious
Right.
campuses, and they mirrored all the best, and they're really spectacular kinds of places, and that sort of made sense in that era. I don't think they make sense anymore. And, the sort of building on the experience that you've had already, with doing a whole series of campuses, what could you tell, to me, what would you be able to take out of that and sort of adapt to a very different, to create the $2,000 car rather than the $28,000
I think it's a great question because
Yeah.
it always strikes me that some of the aspirations are for mistakes that have already been made here. So you have to be persuasive, not to repeat those things. But I think a lot of it with the university planning, it starts with the sort of curriculum and the pedagogy and what the philosophy is there, and then what the spatial implications are. I think a lot of these American universities are becoming way overbuilt.
Yeah.
And the cost per square foot per student is absurd. And I hate to say it, but we're doing some of those. We're building on existing campuses, so we're adding some of that square footage, and it's all an effort to be competitive, which is a whole different problem we have here, where universities really compete, and that gets down to dormitory square footage, amenities, the gym, all these. My son goes to RISD. They even have gyms all over the place, which are empty. But student centers. We do a lot of the student centers. That's just often huge amounts of space. But you really want to get in, and so much of it with universities is look at your curriculum, look at your scheduling, look at the overlaps. How can spaces start to do more than one thing? It's basic stuff, and I think you find that you're maybe at 50% what you're spending here. Also, I think some of these other countries might be willing to have longer days, which again reduces the amount of classroom facilities. I do think it's
six students to a dorm room, and
so all that stuff. I think that could be really good. I also think environmentally, a lot of American firms, but can bring this level of sophistication, which, in terms of the long-term, maintenance operation of facilities, can be significantly lower. I mean, a fraction of what's being spent at a lot of the American universities. A lot of our universities, you're tapping into a central, utility plant that was built in the '60s or designed, in that era, and is not at all responsive to, where the world is now.
As opposed to overbuilding, we're doing quite a different kind of a study now for the University of Chicago. And the students walk around with T-shirts saying, "Where fun came to die." And it's a black T-shirt. And the university had gotten kind of concerned. What's the problem here? And there's a group, CSL, Campus and Student Life, and they've asked us to do a major study to try to figure out on the campus, nothing to do with the academics, which you find there, but what's the lifestyle of the students and what kinds of spaces are they using to get together and to meet their professors and to share information, and everything's that they're on laptops, in the coffee shop, and how does it all work now? And should we be building a major student center, or should we be diversified and doing a lot of small different kinds of social spaces? They have 2/3 graduate students and 1/3 undergraduates, and what does that mix mean? And the public spaces, you have Burnham's Plaisance, Midway Plaisance going through the middle of the campus, and the campus isn't allowed to use it really, and so it's a whole different way of looking at a campus master plan. It's how to make life better for the students,
right,
and make it more appealing. And what we're starting to find is that there's a much broader group of students than the administration even is aware of that are coming in. And in fact, after Illinois, the largest group is from California. And it's changing student attitudes. And in a way, we're beginning to find that they're on the right track already, and a lot of things are happening that they don't realize are happening. And at the end of the study, we may be saying, yeah, hey, you're doing a great job, rather than here's the way to do the campus totally differently. But it's a learning process about the evolution that's going on this campus, and quite different from your traditional master plan. It's pretty good fun.
I think that's interesting, because it kind of goes back to what you're saying about process, which is so fundamental, especially to farm work, but to all work. And that sounds like a great project. We've done a couple of business. We did a business school at UMass Dartmouth a while ago, and then we've just done some others. And most of these schools have unionized faculty, and so you're working on your program for the business school, and you discover that every single faculty member needs an office that is 152 square feet. It has to have this, that, and the other thing. And that sounds pretty innocuous, and you just bang it out. And then you realize that you've just provided a way for the faculty to hide in their offices all day and never interact with the students. And by contrast, we had done another school where basically what the president wanted at this school was just the places for teaching, and he'd solve where the faculty went some other way, which is interesting. And then you got all these sort of very informal encounters occurring all day long, which completely changes the vitality of the school. So I think you'd have an opportunity to do something very different.
And honestly, with today's technology, it used to be, if you're a professor, you needed 500 books on the shelves. Now, you have your laptop. That's all you need. So you can be itinerant. But of course, human beings haven't evolved that much in the last 50 years. So we still have these habits of wanting to find sort of protected, sheltered spaces, even though the technology allows us to be nomads.
In the 80s, we did a lot of, I had a firm that only did interior architecture, and we did a lot of corporate spaces, and we were the architects for Gemini Consulting, which is now Capgemini, and we had offices all over the world that we ran. And we were doing a lot of those 80s techniques, the hoteling, the concierge service, all that. and we would set up these offices that had no hierarchy. There were no, perimeter offices. Everyone was at the same cube. And it was so interesting because the CEO would occupy a cube, and suddenly you'd see geography starting to create around the cube. So I don't know how much you could do, but you could sure make it look a lot more democratic.
Did you ever go back to some of those spaces? And because it would be really interesting to see, did those hoteling concepts work?
I think, it's interesting. We're doing a study right now with the GSA, and the GSA is looking at the price of oil. They're the biggest land or building owners in the country. They're looking at the price of oil and what that's going to do. And they have mandates going into place where a huge percentage of government workers are going to have to telecommute. It's actually a staggering amount. Some entire agencies will have to telecommute, not the IRS because they can't get security at home, but other agencies. And so actually we're going back and we're re-looking at all of those techniques, and I think a lot of those techniques really worked. So I think it did. If the biggest impulse was to dramatically reduce the amount of square foot per facility, that worked.
Well, it's funny because I just came off of a committee meeting at my undergraduate college, which is Mount Holyoke College. And we have, over the last few years, built some very elaborate new structures. I think you did one of them over there. Maybe.
I don't think it was me.
Maybe not, it wasn't you. Pat, did your firm do one at Holyoke? I don't know who the architects were. I try to keep out of who the architects are who get involved with Holyoke.
I think Weissman and Freddie did the student center.
Several.
Mount Holyoke. Yeah.
But there's some very good ones. But the alums.
We're in the city, not the campus.
The problem with Mount Holyoke is that they've spent a lot of money on a lot of elaborate plans. And the alums are getting very angry about this because we're asked to do these things. So what we're interested in is why we went to that school, is for the academic training and what we learned as students when we were there. And we don't want to see about this big building. We want to see about, we're going to donate money to that school. We want that school to go into the teaching of what happens in that school. And so that's very important. And the other thing is, with computers being used for just about everything, you're off in your own little cubicle, and you're at your computer, and you don't talk to anybody else. You're just sort of there. Where when I was a student there, you were in the library. You had your carol, and everybody interacted, and it was a very interesting kind of thing. And then you went to your house for lunch or dinner, this kind of thing. And then there was a student union where people got together, for informal things, or the gym when there was a major meeting. And but those things aren't happening anymore. You're living at your computer. You've got these elaborate edifices around campus that cost a lot of money, and they do nothing except put the name of some wealthy alum on the front of it. I mean, it doesn't really count. We don't really care. And so there is a reaction against that kind of overbuilt campus.
There's an opportunity. I mean, I've read some articles recently talking about these spaces in New York and other cities where you can just sort of rent a workstation for a day or 2 days or a week or whatever. And it's a lot of kids who are working on their own, or maybe they're working for the patent office like my nephew is, and he works remotely. He had to work in the DC area for 2 years, and after 2 years they basically said, get out of here, you know what you're doing, go anywhere in the country you want, here's your connection. But, he's 24 years old, and, he doesn't have a big social network. So they need places where you can sort of be on your own with other people. So there are these little incubator spaces, and in some ways they're the student centers for people who have graduated and are now working on their own. And you still need that face-to-face, and you need someone to bounce ideas off of, and it's often actually better that they're not exactly in your field, but they're the same age as you and they're starting up a company too, or they're also telecommuting for a large government office. So it creates an interesting physical space opportunity, and how do you design that?
That's a major thing that's happened. I mean, I see it as being an independent person. I'm, producing my own things, and I'm a member of this group called Hidden Tech in Western Mass. And once a week, there's an email that goes out saying, where can we meet? And I've got 15 people. We want to have a meeting. We all have laptops. We want wireless, and it's becoming more and more common. And those kids are not 20 anymore. They're 30, and they're starting to run some major businesses, So it's really interesting turn of events.
Well, so many firms now are telecommuting, and that's obviously what we're doing with this Skype thing, because that's actually what we're doing, is we're telecommuting until
Yep.
we get to the point where we actually have to be on site, sitting across the table from someone to get the details knocked together, and you really have to be in the same room to do that kind of thing. But this is telecommuting, and Alfonso is telecommuting from his office in Boston. And if he's still there,
He's been awfully quiet.
See, this is the problem with telecommuting. we're unable to manage him.
Well,
exactly.
that's true.
Exactly.
Which is why we use video conferencing in ours, because you
Yeah.
actually have to show up on camera.
Yeah.
How miserable you look. You have to show up on
I
camera.
would argue that this is one area where the United States is veering off again from experience in the rest of the world. And that's sort of this kind of a model of the office hotel and people with the laptops, etc. That ain't what's going on in most other
I
places
know.
around the world. And, particularly, in China, in most of these places that we're thinking about, our opportunities overseas. That ain't the model.
No,
Well, and I
it's
think
social.
it's changing here as cost per square foot came
Yeah.
down. I think this was very much
Yeah.
an economically driven thing in
Yes.
the 80s. But
Mhm.
certain entities want to do it still.
Yeah.
Well, and I think as the
But
price
if
of
you think-
oil goes up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you think about the problem, say, of, the India. India has all these young people who are coming out of these technical institutes, et cetera, and are moving into cities for the first time, and have come out of families that are traditional and, are sort of young people on their own for the first time. I don't know what that means sociologically and space-wise, but I would argue to me, that poses a different kind of a problem for the architects to sort of, focus in on and solve than the one that we're talking about in terms of sort of American young people who,
Right.
grew up with the machines and now need this sort of interconnectivity.
But I think actually some of this telecommunication and telecommuting is happening in other countries as well.
It's
Maybe,
In
I don't
China, they're very technologically savvy. They're big distances, and it solves the problem of getting from one place to another. And a lot of them have come to the U.S. and gone to school here or worked here for a while, so they've picked up either our good habits or our bad habits. But I mean, I think the areas of the economy that are growing the fastest in places like India are the tech related. And I think you're going to start seeing some of this sort of stuff happening there as well.
We're seeing it in London. I mean, of course, ours is ridiculous because we have 5 partners and all of us live in different parts of the world. And we telecommute. I mean, we use video conferencing to get together. But we do have an office in London, and it's this absolutely delightful little townhouse in St. James Square. But we had an architect who was in our office who was working actually in London on a project for his country. And there was almost no one else in the office. So one of my partners suddenly discovered this guy was actually living in the office because it saved him the money of buying of renting something in London. It's very expensive. And the poor guy had nothing, so he was saving every penny he could get, and he was living in the office. So my partner made very certain that he had a very comfortable sofa and that the fridge was well stocked, and the poor guy could do it. But he was literally sleeping under his desk. And we've all known students when we were at school who lived on cornflakes and virtually had no money.
Well, so he was doing the opposite of telecommuting.
Yes, that's what I mean, because we were
He was
all...
squatting in his
He was
office.
squatting in the office because none of us were there to see that he was squatting in the office. I mean, we felt nothing sorry for him. The guy did everything we could, and we thought it was terribly amusing without hurting his feelings.
Right.
But this is the other thing that happens. You've got to have some sort of a focus that everybody can commute with. You've got to have some sort of hub.
You know, Bill, getting back to something you were saying, so that in India, people moving into the city, young people, that sort of a social issue. I think in some ways, the thing that I find most daunting about working in other cultures is the lack of understanding. And how can one be sure that you create something that's culturally relevant? I mean, we're having the problem here at the University of Chicago. We have something that's socially not relevant. So I think first there's the dilemma of how to get the work, and then the dilemma. Now we're working on an opera house right now in Korea, a competition, and it happens in our office is a wonderful designer who lives about an hour from the town we're working in, and so he's been over there, and so I can try stuff, I can do this, and he tells me if we're culturally relevant or not, and some of the stuff I've learned has been fantastic. They have all these megaplex cinemas where they put all the theaters at the top of the building. And we're doing this opera house where we wanted to put all the theaters at the top with views out. And I didn't think you could do that, and then it turned out, oh no, indeed, this is a type that you can find in Korea. But that is, I think, a dilemma. How do you get the right process to find what you need to make it relevant? So, technology, maybe this university doesn't really have technology. Well, that would be very different, I think, architecturally.
Yeah.
Do you think it could be done this way, like something, a Skype connection or?
Oh, absolutely. I think Skype's pretty normal now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we actually interviewed for something in Mozambique a few months ago using Skype.
Yeah. And there's I think, what is it? Microsoft is buying Skype, and Skype is an arrangement with Comcast, where you're going to be able to get it on right in your home and your television.
Right.
Is interactive, and Bose is coming up with a new television that has this all wrapped into it, and this is being developed at MIT. Mm-hmm. So this is something for us.
It's all out there, yeah. It's just a matter of implementing.
Very common.
Yeah.
That's why we have Tom on board.
Well.
But no, I mean, this kind of thing can happen. And this is exactly what I'm hoping to develop in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
We have a good chance of dealing with Mexico, bringing them back into the same thing that I worked on down there and Ricardo worked on. It would be very nice if we could do it through one of the television networks down there. Now, there's a chance of doing it with Carlos Slim, who is very involved in all sorts of technological things. I think he owns a telephone company, and he owns, of course, one of the major television networks. And if we can get someone like that to work with us, and with the architecture community down there, with Ibero Americana University, which we've worked with before, and if we can do something like that, it's really great. And network it in with something like Harvard, where Kate Ryan and I have been talking about this. And if you can do that, because as you know, when we go out in the field, we're always running into Harvard types, and it becomes an alumni meeting, and then it connects with not only the architects who have gone there, but you get into the public officials, and you're getting into everyone else. All at Harvard, everybody wants to find out what's going on campus. You can merge all of these things together and make them in a little network that works. It's not a commercial network. It's not like Facebook. And it's not like anything else. This is strictly non-commercial, strictly an interactive network among professionals. I think it can be done, because that way you can do it. And you can do it one-to-one, or you can do it in the whole group. You don't have to do it, but you don't have to go through Facebook. You don't have to go through something like that, which commercializes it and also puts on this sort of a facade of you're trying to make an impression. This one, you're just talking to some guy who's in the same field you're in, and you're trying to set up something that's going to work. And, you know, but that's, the trick is getting that to work, because it's so simple, and it's right there. It's just like picking up a telephone used to be, or picking up a video conference is the way it is now. But getting something that's inexpensive enough for the guys in Benin to tune into.
See, to me, the real key is the necessity of routinizing the relationships over
Right.
time. Because the real key is as you said, Charles, you were able to operate quite effectively in Korea because you had this
Right.
good, close existing relationship with somebody who happened to know the town and was tied in there. And so, you know, when the opportunity came along for your activity there, you immediately had someone who knew you knew, there was a trust relationship, there was a
Right,
working
right.
relationship already well established, and, you know, that then immediately got going. You know, my problem, I've worked in a number of countries, far too many over the past 15 years, and for me to try and keep a relationship with
right.
various folks that I've worked with over the years in all of these places, it's just, it'll take all my time. So consequently, you end up not doing it, and
Yeah,
so
that's the question. How do you build up the network of people who are the contacts and keep
Yeah.
that base?
Someone in,
yeah.
you know, Niger is talking to somebody
Right.
in Benin who's also
Yeah.
talking to someone in Buenos Aires.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and the technology is useful because, you know, what can happen is, you know, I finish some kind of a report or something that I've just written or whatever, you push the button and it goes out to all these people and they, oh, Bill wrote an article, you know, and then I get a little note back from somebody I knew in Kazakhstan, you know, 9 years ago, says, oh, your article was interesting, we're doing this, and et cetera, so it sort of keeps, but it's, you know, I guess the ability to sort of outsource that or outsource the routinization of it to something like an architects association.
You know, we probably don't want to go as far as, say, LinkedIn, which
Yeah.
drives me crazy when I get something saying, you may also know so-and-so, and I think that they're actually maybe trying to contact me.
Yeah.
I think you can get them with Stella, maybe.
Yeah, Pat tried to cut it. I don't have
It's the
Facebook
devil.
account.
Yeah, it's the devil.
So it turns out there's a computer putting us all together, and it's
My
not
assistant-
the personal thing.
My assistant left the office this morning. This was the end of her routine. I don't have a replacement yet. And she has always done my Facebook and my LinkedIn, and so it was on my computer today. What a waste of time. I mean, I could have spent the whole day, you know, checking out people.
Yeah, yeah.
Margaret, is there a way that the BSA can slide into this? And we were already using the montage journal things for it that we put on the International Committee page. Is there a way that we can do this to sort of reach out, and the BSA as a professional organization could act as add that particular level to the matrix of communication that we're dealing with?
It's conceivable, I suppose.
Well, but,
It takes
I would think carefully about what are the tools that are already out there, you know, like the multifaceted conversations on Skype and things like this, because the BSA we can do a lot of things, but we don't necessarily want to like reinvent a tool that somebody else is going to do better or is already doing better.
No, I might
So-
just tune into it, not invent it. Because I know Richard Fitzgerald and I talked about this when we first, the idea of this thing first came up. And we were trying to figure out how it would happen. Because there's so many architects around the world who have somehow been in the BSA community, even if it's as we're academics or whatever, or professionally, they worked here and they want to keep in contact with them, and they do it through currents and they do it things like
Well,
that.
Each committee has a page on the website, so there may be some way to make your page robust or
Right.
a little more interactive.
So that people who are interested in international, wherever they happen to be in the world,
Yeah.
can sort of
Can
tie
follow
in.
that and
Right.
leave messages for
Right,
you or.
because we have that now on the website. I don't think any of the committees have gotten started using it because you know we've been just trying to make sure everything's working, you know, at the baseline levels. But there is like sort of forums and chat kind of features. attached to each committee's page, so that if you got that rolling and people were engaged in it, people could be posting, exchanging messages within the, you know, international committee, you know, network.
If we could, if we could just sort of somehow let them know that these things are there, just put reports like Bill sends out, or like our transcripts, so that this will be a transcription, and hopefully with this transcript, when it goes in, we'll have people respond to how this conversation is relevant to them.
We also are looking at, you know, how best to utilize the staff that we have, and whether or not it makes sense for us to redeploy someone toward just managing the committees, so that there is an effort to connect the dots with what the committees are doing independently of one another and get some coordination and collaboration going that way. And part of that remit might be to keep an eye on or maintain to a certain degree the committee pages. I mean, we have a lot of committees, very limited staff, and we're just trying to figure out how best to make this all work together.
Do the different chapters, I mean, work together? I mean, there's probably international committees at several different chapters around the world,
Well, I
around
mean,
the
there's the
country.
knowledge communities,
Yeah.
and some of them seem to be more robust and active than others, and there's some of the communities here at the BSA are plugged in with the national level knowledge communities, but there's others that are just doing something different, you know, they've got their own specific niche. But that's another thing I would like to try and encourage more among our members and committee chairs, is to tune in to the AIA knowledge communities if there's one that's relevant to you, because then, you know, it's expanding, you know, well beyond this region, and you'll get to connect with a lot of other folks around the country.
It could be interesting maybe next year to invite someone from the International Committee from the California chapter.
Big
or-
SIBs.
That's what
Whatever.
we'd like to do.
Yeah.
No, when we first started the International Committee, the AIA, one of the real problems was how do you reach out into the field, how do you connect with the field, and how do we get everybody together who's interested in international, because at that point, very few of us were. And
But I remember the first couple of times you had Helen from National. What's her
yeah,
name?
Ellen, she's no longer there.
Yeah, I know.
Bob can tell us who we
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
contact
yeah.
now. Luckily, we have a contact at the AIA. But no, we're trying to figure out some way to make it work.
So the international committee at the AIA level, it seems like, are some of them more focused, like those are architects that are working and living overseas now, and then
Exactly.
maybe it seems like
Or-
they're not necessarily interacting so much with some of the US-based architects.
Yeah.
I think it's both.
Well, one of the liabilities of it is they don't connect. They're interested more or less in somehow keeping the architects who are working internationally in contact with the AIA. It's just like the Harvard network. They want to be, the other architects want to be connected with the AIA, but they're not in a lot of cases. And they become sort of insulated little areas where an architectural firm or a group of architects who are involved with the International Committee are interested in making contacts or internationally, but they're basically worried about their own firm. They're not worried about the AIA or the international architect in general. Whereas now that was one of my major problems with the AIA's International, because when I first came here, it was basically to try to figure out how to make the local chapter, the Boston Society of Architects was the largest chapter at that point, how to make that work with the international that we were trying to set up there. Because nobody knew what they were doing. Everybody's flying by the seat of their pants at that point. But if we can somehow tie things in so that we started, like this forum is great because we talk about just about everything. As you've noticed here, we never follow the questions. Cliff writes these questions, these wonderful questions every year. We never follow up on them. But they start people thinking, they take those home and they think about them there. But the thing is, somehow getting this kind of information out to everybody who's here. And the International Committee in this particular one is very important because we're not here in most cases. We keep track of each other by telephone, by the internet, by just somehow connecting that way, because we're not here for meetings all the time. I mean, it's just that kind of committee, because as the whole point is to get people out there working in the world, right, Pat?
Yeah. It seems to me that if our goal is to put together this database of architects and related professionals internationally, it's not a Facebook social thing. So what we need to do is very carefully say, what is the reason that we're trying to build up this database, and what do we want these people to be talking about and be available for to help each other in the future? And is it for student exchanges? Is it for a firm in one country getting a job in another country? Is it disaster relief after an emergency situation? Is it cultural exchange? I mean, what is it exactly that we want these people to be available to talk to each other on an as-needed basis for? And it's not just a freewheeling, chat room kind of a thing. It's quite different.
Well, that's the whole point. We do it here. I mean, this is where our freewheeling conversations, because there were new ideas get thrown into the pot and worked on and then elaborated out in the field. But in something like this, it's architect to architect. And you're working on a project, or you're just getting to know people in that country because you're interested in that country, and you get to meet the architects in that country and you chat and find out what they're doing, what's important to them, how they feel about things. And that's the whole key to it. Establishing some sort of a relationship before you actually have to go in on site and do something. But it's just, I'm terribly excited about being able to go back to Mexico and build on what we started years ago. I'd hate to tell you how many years ago, but then you build on it. But now you're building with a group of architects, young architects who are technically savvy. So this is a way of building on what they've got, bringing them into it, getting their ideas, but you're getting it from different countries, and you're getting their point of view and what's important to them.
So how often has the International Committee met up with the Alien Architects Committee in recent years?
We have more and more, but it's still that we used to be the same committee. And it was all together, and it was really, as Pat can tell you, we had architects from every country around. They'd all come in here. It was all the International Committee. And then there was the REBA came in, and REBA was trying to do a lot of things with the AIA, and it was this thing. And so the Aliens Committee developed around a REBA person who was here.
Aliens Committee?
That's what they
Aliens
call
Committee.
themselves. The
Yeah.
Alien Architects Committee.
That's,
and
they
So
chose
they're
it.
foreign architects who are working in.
Working in the States.
Yeah, and really a big focus that they've sort of taken on is
And their logo is like a
this
flying
committee
saucer?
is more about.
You've seen
Pretty
Men in
much.
Black.
This committee's more about focusing on getting work overseas, whereas a big focus of the Alien Architects is helping, foreign architects or foreign trained architects who are living and working in this country navigate like the path to licensure, or how can they get employed here, given the
Alienness.
And that's kind of why they chose the name Alien Architects, because they felt like dealing with immigration and whatever.
That says a lot right there, right?
It was, that was the kind of wall that they felt, and so that's been something that they focused a lot on. So on one hand, the sort of goals of the committees are a little bit different, but certainly they're a great resource in terms of being a network to get to know architects from other countries, and make those kind of connections you're talking about to get the sort of cultural awareness and things like that. Just as been sort of social gatherings,
Well, this is what we did, and as Pat can tell you, because Pat at that point was hiring had several international architects in his office, and we tried to work with it. And as I say, until this sort of it diverged into two different committees, and now George and I are trying to figure out some way to get back together again. And because he sees that his people, his is going off on a tangent, it's not working. Ours works, but we're all over the world. We're having a meeting like this. It's great, but I'd say a half dozen guys are off on their own projects and their own thing, and they'll all tune in to find out what's the transcript is for this, and then they'll know, but they'll be in contact. But if we could bring them together and make it work, and make us not against each other, and yet we're all part of the same group, but we've got to relax, because theirs has become a social network as well as a professional network, where ours isn't. I mean, we're friends, but it's not that focused. But it's difficult for me. It's like Alfonso is sitting out there in Boston listening to us, I hope.
Maybe.
And
Can we get him to respond?
yeah,
No.
getting to
Border
respond.
He's
Alfonso,
on
were
the
you
off.
there?
So it reminds me of the Jetsons.
Oh, he is there.
There, oh, good.
And George Jetson, you know, they had
Yeah, right.
they had the video, and you know when he would want to leave, and he would just put a cutout of himself, so that the camera would look at it and look like he was still there.
Not too far away.
Getting
Yeah.
the same sense here.
Maybe we
Want to
should
give
ask
Alfonso
Alfonso
some
what he has to
airspace to
say.
weigh in here?
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah. So Alfonso, how do you react to all this?
I mean, I would like to see more from the point of view of Colombia. You know, it's a very, very, you know, like many ideas here. And I think that the key focus when I talk to Estelle about the meeting is see how we can create a bridge, you know, with my country, with Colombia. I recently tried to establish, you know, myself, you know, some sort of contact with Colombia as I think Charles was talking about. The reality, you know, how you interact with that culture. And Colombia is a very particular place, you know, not only because of, you know, the cultural setback, the turmoil, the political turmoil that has been living for years and years, and how people move right there, you know. So I think not only how the BSA can help us, but how, you know, ourselves can gather at some point and understand how you can really create an opportunity to work in a country like Colombia, which in my opinion is very difficult. That's the way I see it, even being Colombia, and lately even trying to find possibility for work down there. And my reaction is not only you have to understand, you know, the culture there, but also, you know, how you create those connections and who really is the right connection to have down there. Like, that's you know, like my view of all of this. You know, I would say that the more you can simplify the process in order to establish this, is the better.
I mean, what's also interesting to me, what's happening in Colombia, is that they've hired Colombian architects to do these plum commissions, and that they have a sort of deep well of very talented architects, Colombian architects, and that they didn't go out and hire Renzo Piano to do this library. They found, you know, John Franco Mazzanti, and there's a bunch of other Colombian architects doing interesting things.
I think,
Was that a conscious decision, do you think?
what, I mean, from the money point of view, yes, because if you understand a country like this one, you know, you have to pay your employees, etc. The way that it works in Colombia, you know, is just the difference is huge. It's just humongous. Like, for example, I was just talking to a person who contacted me and told me, oh, can you just send me a proposal for a project here in Colombia? And then, you know, and I said, okay, what, you know, like I was trying to understand a little bit, because the reality is I just did an internship there before I left the country. Well, I was trying to get familiar with reality. What do I have to do to work there? And then the person tells me, yeah, look at the Colombian Society of Architects, you know, how projects are, you know, like how the fee for projects put together here in Colombia. I say, fine, you know, I look for everything, send my letters, etc. And the second email I get from them is, remember, architects here, they lower the fees up to 50% of what the Colombia Society of Architects sets up. And I said, wow. And then I got to look at it's almost impossible, you know, to compete, you know, with the way they work. The way I see that a person working from here, you know, and trying to establish some sort of bridge in Colombia, it would not be other than a collaboration with architects there. So you could somehow, you know, like establish some sort of relationship. I don't know if for example, doing it with a person like Giancarlo, which I personally know when I was in college there, would be the right thing, because you know, like Giancarlo is, for example, a person like Giancarlo is in a totally different stage for a country like Colombia, where there are not too many architect stars, like, you know, maybe United States, so England, etc. We also, you know, like Colombia is a country where you won't see companies like big companies or corporations, you know, working in architecture. Usually what happens there, you know, either you have very small architecture studios up to 15 people, or you see that the construction companies themselves, like to give you an example, like Aria Serna in Sarabia, which is one of the, you know, better recognized companies there, is a construction company, but I also have like their own group of architects, and that's the way they operate. So if somehow, you know, you're able to find a bridge or a connection to be able to work in collaboration with them, I believe that probably that would be a good opportunity, you know, to put your foot in a country like Colombia.
Are there many American architects working in Colombia? Do you know?
Not really. I recently hear from a friend of mine who is leading a company in I'm from a small city on the northeast of Colombia, closer to the border with Venezuela, called Bucaramanga. This city has a little bit of the dynamics in Bucaramanga are changing in the last, I'd say, last 8 years. After Chavez took over in Venezuela, there is a huge flow of population coming from Venezuela, especially to my city.
Sure.
Because of that, the amount of, you know, the economic has risen a lot. So you see a huge explosion of construction, etc., etc. So now I've heard from a couple of, you know, like friends that work in the construction industry in my city, that they are willing to talk to foreign companies to bring in design buildings in my city. But it is a very atypical thing that you hear in Colombia.
And when they look for American architects, are they looking for a certain set of skills, like an architect who has an expertise in healthcare design or higher education?
No, I don't. I think that differs also a lot from the United States and a country like Colombia. In my humble experience, you know, for what I can see, for example, here that now I'm trying to do, you know, and trying to establish my own practice with my old bosses, which are much older than me and much more experienced than me. You know, I can see that United States somehow, every time that you go for a project, every time that you have to try to set a proposal together, you really have to show how many buildings of this type you build, how many, you know, what those credentials. Colombia works a little bit different. I think in Colombia it's more about either the connection that you have direct with the client, and also they look for the architect a little bit more of as a creative person and not necessarily this a specialized type of professional. That's the reason for why if you see you know, some of the new architects that are being published in even architectural record, for example, Paisajes Emergentes, which is this small company from Medellin. You see these very young architects that jump into the field, you know, trying to explore and trying to do new things, and they're given the opportunity, but you know, they're designing from swimming pools and sport facilities to renovations of stadiums and stuff like that, being very, very young. Why? Because it is not necessary to show, you know, that level of expertise on a particular field or particular programmatic, you know, like object or architecture piece. So it's a little bit different. I think that wouldn't be a problem in order to, for example, to put your foot in Colombia to show, you know, how many buildings of certain type you would design, but more to really find the right connection and the opportunity to set up, you know, an economical type of plan to be able to work with them.
Now, is it also because in Colombia they use the competition system? So if you're 26 years old and you just have a brilliant design, you submit it, you get selected?
It happens, you know, like the competition system happens on the public sector, you know, like you have to go for a library, etc., you know, something that is funded by the government. But other than that, you know, it's you know, if you want to do residential or, you know, office buildings, it's really direct, you know, with the client that you can. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to win a competition. Not everything is competition. But if you most of the, you know, like the government projects are competition. And now, I don't really know, you know, like how straight that, how do you say, the fact of choosing the winners, or, you know, all of this, how straight it really is in a country like Colombia, you know, it is, I wonder, you know, like you never know really the winner is already been for. And, you know, this is a political thing that they have to do in order to show that it is a competition, you know, but you never know. I mean, if you really see who are the people who are building the new, you know, institutional buildings are put them on competitions by the government, usually it's just 5 or 6 people. I mean, in a country like Colombia, which is over 40-something million, with a lot of talent going there, you wonder why, you know, like just 4 or 5 people. You know, me, myself, you know, when I look at the Colombian Society of Architects and I look at the list of competitions, you know, I mean, sometimes I wonder if really it's worth for me to put all the time and effort that it costs me, especially being here in the US, to compete in a competition like Colombia that maybe just 4 or 5 people, as usual, are going to be selected.
No,
Although Stephen Holt just was selected for the National University, which is a beautiful project. I don't know who he's teamed with though. Maybe he was brought in on a pre-selected list of 5 or 6.
I was very surprised when I saw that Stephen Hall just got that project at the National University of Bogotá, because it was a total surprise for me. I'll never. I mean, but as surprising it is for me to see the new breed of projects that are coming from Colombia. Because if I look back in time, 10 years ago, and you will see that those type of projects are born in a country like Colombia right now. But I don't know how Stephen Hall really, how that worked in him to get a project, and especially being in the National University is also, you know, it's a public school.
I mean, sometimes that happens because a place or a country or an institution now feels more confident that they don't have to just hire a local, that in some ways the local architects have proven themselves, so now they can expand the sphere of candidates. And I think maybe what they're trying to do is send a message and say, look, you know, we're now good enough, we can compete with everyone. We'll bring in even some foreign star architects and push the competition even further. Now, the connections that you're talking about amongst architects in Colombia, are those connections that are normally made at school, or are they normally made at different firms that these architects had worked at early in their career? Is there sort of a mentoring system where if you worked for architect A, you know, 30 years later, you're still part of his network, or
No.
how does it work over there?
No, it doesn't work like that. I think it really works, you know, like it's more on the, I mean, of course, you know, it depends, you know, if you go to a particular school and how you build to your life, you know, that network of connections. But I don't necessarily think that in a country like Colombia, you know, you see those cases. Very few cases you see where the architect that worked for so long for someone, and then, you know, from getting built is, one of those cases would be more someone like Daniel Bonilla that worked for, not a very well-known architect, but a construction company that was very well-known, and then he established his own practice, and he had sort of like that clientele with him. But I think in general basis is more the general network that people have and how they move, you know, in that network to find their own clients. Colombian culture, you know, when you look at, especially, for example, if you look at a culture like Medellin in particular, Medellin is a very, very good case. People from Medellin, they're very, very push-forward people, you know, and they really, really, from very early age, they try to establish their own business. So it is like somehow even when people come out of college, you know, because of the same situation of the country, they're exposed to a very different reality. So once you're out of college, you really need to find a way to do things no matter how, otherwise you don't make it.
Mhm.
So people, thrive on that sort of environment. And but in that same way, people are always trying to find things to do. And I think that particular culture, that particular way of being is what starts somehow breeding this new architecture, that way to explore and that way to find new ways to find out. Which in a way sometimes, differs a lot from a country like the US, like there's a lot of opportunities, but I believe me, for example, coming from Colombia and starting to work here and trying to do something here, we become a little bit more used to the system where you can find a job, where you can always, find a way to do something and not always looking for the way to do it on your own. Because there are some more opportunities in that sense. But in Colombia, you don't have them. It's very uncertain that you as an architect, for example, you come out of school and you will find a job as an architect. It's very rarely. I can tell you that out of my friends that finish school with me, I'll say more than 60% of them don't work in architecture anymore.
Are they happy?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, not really. But you see very often in Colombia what they do is when they come out of college, you see a very particular team. You see a guy that comes out of the business administration, a civil engineer, and an architect, and they set their own construction companies. And so from very early they start building. Lately, it's been on a like it's rising the construction for many years, and the economy is being very steep up. But before was more, like the cycles up and down. So people were much more afraid of getting into the construction business nowadays. Like nowadays, everybody wants to be in Colombia in the construction business.
What do you think American architects can learn from the way things work in Colombia?
It is a very good question. I don't know, I would say that not only architects, but it would be, like the institution that governs, the way we architects work, and see how, how could be more open, and the way we establish a relationship with the architect. I believe that you don't really need to design 100, like schools or houses in order to be able, to probably design another house.
Mm-hmm.
So given, that's, if architects here we're willing, to, or the organizations here were willing to give the opportunities to people in a little bit of a different way, I think that would benefit, a lot, especially in the moment that we're living, where the economy is down, and et cetera, et cetera.
Is the sense an optimistic one in Colombia right now amongst architects? Is there the
Yes.
sense that things have turned around in the last 10 years and Colombia is now pointed in the right direction, or how are
I
people
think
feeling?
Yes, I think so. People are trying to. I wouldn't say it from the design point of view. Like that's I don't, because not everybody is Giancarlo Mazzanti, or
Right.
for them it's a totally different story. But for the other type of like the new people that are working out there, I think it is very optimistic.
Mhm.
And also in many other business, you can see people, and from what I can hear also, there's a lot of international investment going on right now in Colombia. People, I haven't been able, unfortunately, to go in the last 12 years because of my political situation, etc. But for example, people tell me that it was very rare in the time that I was there that you would see foreigners in the streets. You rarely see them in the street. You will see some people sometimes at the universities, but what people tell me right now says, Alfonso, you come here and you see people from Italy, from the United States walking in the street. You hear many languages in the street, and also, like people that are in the business industry, like business administration or lawyers, etc. Said that they started even to work with people that want to go and work in Colombia. So I think that shows it. And also, I think in the last 10 years, having a Uribe as a president and somehow the fact that the country is more secure, that you can travel in the country, that of course, we still have problems with guerrillas, et cetera, but the safe levels, has risen quite a lot, so that makes people much more comfortable to go there and do business there.
Sure. I mean, people aren't gonna go to a place if they think that they may get kidnapped or killed.
Yeah, I was just looking into Peru, and I happened to pull up some websites, and that's the first thing they were talking about, getting kidnapped if you get into the wrong taxi at the airport. And so wait a minute, that's not really helping tourism, but I certainly have been reading that in Colombia, tourism really is picking up there.
Yes. I actually talked to, it is, if you look at Cartagena de Indias, some phenomena, have happened, for example, in a city like Cartagena, where there is so much international investment that actually right now people from the city are not able to afford, living there. Like, for example, living in the old town of Cartagena or the new areas in El Laguitos. He said, my friends, Alfonso, we cannot afford living there. It's very, very expensive.
What else is driving the economy other than tourism?
Excuse me, can you repeat?
Yeah, what else is driving the economy in Colombia other than tourism?
I mean, there are many industries, like you have the construction industry right now is really strong, but I sadly have to say too that there is a back part of it in black and dark, which is, I'm sure that there is big part of the money in Colombia that is still part of drug trafficking. Mm-hmm. It just works in a different level, or in a different way to the public, but I still believe that there is a lot of money that runs through that way.
Architects don't care where the money comes from.
Alfonso, to get back to your...
still invest a lot of money. It doesn't work nowadays that it used to work in the Pablo Escobar Gaviria era, but Colombia is still, it's a country where drugs is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Alfonso, to get back to your very first question, you said, how do we establish a bridge? How did the Colombians suggest that we establish a bridge over to us? What's on the other? We're on one side of the bridge. You guys are on the other side of the bridge. How do we build that bridge so that we meet each other in it?
I believe that. I don't know necessarily. Talking to architects and understanding how they work there, it is important for us as a knowledge, if you really put your foot there and understand what happens. But I don't really necessarily believe that the direct relationship with architects is the one that really creates the bridge. I think that, like some other organizations, et cetera, that you can actually talk to them and understand, how they work and eventually get them interested in hiring, foreign designers, foreign architects. I think that's in my opinion, the way it is. Now, if you can establish a relationship with architects, but usually Colombian architects, I don't think they will be very happy to know that, that other architects, they will see you as a competition, as anything else.
Alfonso, do you think that if we have a contact in the American Embassy in Bogota. Now, if we establish a relationship down there, or start a relationship down there, working with the Colombian architects to find out how they think and how they work, and bring it together in a video conference here in November, do you think that would be a way of reaching out? Because they would be reaching out to someone who is in the country and who has Colombians working in the office. If we could somehow find out how the Colombians would like to meet us and how they would like to work with us, and we put that together and then deliver this in a video conference here at Build Boston in November, do you think that would be useful?
I think it can be useful. I think it can be also useful for them. because I'm sure they would like to have some exposure. They would like to, be able also, they could, not only from people from here trying to put their food in Colombia, but I'm sure they'll be happy to see if they can do something here in the U.S. I don't know if you would like just to contact architects and maybe some other type of professionals, in the construction industry. I've heard from some other of my friends, that they have a small, construction business right now, especially doing like social, type of like a social housing projects or stuff like that. That, sometimes they're interested and say, how could I, develop something in the U.S.? They don't have the right way to do it. They don't know how to do it, and maybe it would be interesting also to hear, what people from here have to say.
Well, if we had someone from the embassy reach out to this community, if we just knew who to reach out to, I think that this could easily be done, and it could start almost immediately. If we just have some contacts, and we'll put our contacts in contact, obviously, with your people down there, and start working on this. Because this is June, we've got until November to work on this bridge and see how it can be constructed. Because you work over here, you know pretty much how we think and what we have to offer. But we don't really know that much about the Colombian architectural community in general. I mean, we know some of the wonderful things that have happened, and we completely admire what's happened. It's just that we really don't know enough about you to be able to set up an easy interactive relationship. But if we can work through the embassy down there and the Department of Commerce here, which is in Boston, obviously, and we just work together with them, we can come up with something that is some idea and evolve this over the next few months. Do you think that might work?
Yeah, I think you have to set up a really, really, good program and really explain to them very well what the purpose of all of this is. And I think if it is through the embassy, maybe it works. If it is the embassy who actually contacts the people, and invites them, I'm pretty sure they will be interested. You have to start early, and I think they will be interested.
Good. Well, how do we start this from the Colombian side? We've got people in base in Bogota who are willing to do it. It's just that we need to know who we need to talk to in, as I say, construction industry, architecture, any of the planners, and all of those people, the related industries. Just tell us who to talk to, and once we find out who to talk to and put us in the same room, then we can start the development of this, building this bridge.
Maybe, other than contacting, for example, the architects that are going on right now, maybe you could contact some of the construction companies, and see if they're interested also and talk about, how they work and operate in Colombia. Because, that's, for example, a good way for the people and architects here to bridge to Colombia, because construction companies, even though they have their own architectural teams, they do sometimes, do side work and subcontract other architects to do their job. But since I don't know anybody, that is really doing it from the United States, working Colombia with those construction companies. I just know they do that. But yeah, we could.
Is there a really good Colombian architecture magazine?
Can you say it again, excuse me?
Is there a really good Colombian architecture magazine or media company that understands what architects are doing in Colombia?
No, that I know. I think in Colombia, most of the magazines and stuff that talk about architecture in general are more like fashion type things, but I don't think there is nothing really that I know that is like, any like architectural record or, anything like that.
So maybe there's an opportunity there.
Right?
You're speaking to architectural record right now, Alfonso.
What about a web presence? Is there online resources?
I will have to really research and show you something, but I'm not very familiar with it. The best source, to really see what's going on in Colombia and understand what the competitions and what's going on in there is going to the Colombian Society of Architects website.
How about something like the banking community that would be funding projects? Would they have connections with embassies as well as construction companies and architects?
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, this is what we have to do. You have to find out what you've got down there.
The person that I can contact in the embassy will also be really highly in tune with all the architects and the various societies. He was already willing to talk to the Green Building Council down in Colombia, for example. So these are definitely ideas that are already in progress at the embassy too that we could also flesh out.
Right.
So they have a lot of connections being on the ground.
Right. So what we need to do is have some contacts in Colombia, in our architectural community, that can come together and with the contacts we've already got there.
Right.
And that'll open doors for Colombian architects in here, up here, as well as opening doors for us down there. So that bridge will become a two-way network.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it can be done, Alfonso. All we really need to do is find out who we need to start working with down there. And then if we start with maybe, 4 people, 5 people, then we can branch out from there. And because everyone will know how it'll work, and this will eventually evolve into the people who are most effective. But no, I think it can work. Yeah.
I think maybe we should take like a 5-minute little coffee bio break. We've been at it for over. I was going to do it at 2:30, but then we started talking with Alfonso, and I didn't want to cut you off because it was really great to get you involved. But if you can hold on for 5, maybe 10 minutes, we're just going to take a little break and get up, stretch our legs,
Thank you.
and then come back and we'll do 1 more hour and finish up by 4.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see you in a few minutes, Alfonso.
But if you could change one thing or make one thing happen, what would it be? It's collapsing. Pat?
Thank you.
Yeah, I've been talking to Charlie and to Tom, and zero net energy keeps coming up. And one of our great fun projects at the moment is a new courthouse for Lowell, Massachusetts, and consolidating all 5 of the judicial departments into one new facility in the historic, part of the community. And we're part of the study has been we took an extra year, funded by DCAM, the state agency, for us to try to really help us and them understand the state of the art for technology and what's happening around the world. And when you look at around the world, we're so far behind Germany, for instance, and I just saw an article that 13% wind power now for generation, countrywide, and they're supposed to get to 20-something in the next, 5 years. And that's just one form of renewable energy. We have the challenge of China becoming, it's the biggest new market, and they're recognizing that it's such an important environment is so important for them, they're not going to self-destruct, that they're trying to become the biggest technical producers and everything, and all sorts of renewables. We look at designs and we have internal discussions. Should a zero net energy building or a super energy efficient building look like it is, or should it not? And are you buying the Prius where it's trying to look like something different because it is something different, or are you buying a Honda Civic, and whether it's hybrid or not, it looks exactly the same? And there seems like there are a whole bunch of interesting conversations that go on with this, but the bottom line is the whole world has to get together, because we all have to act jointly somehow to protect the environment and try to reverse where we're headed as much as possible.
So what has to change to make that happen?
Well, one of the biggest things that has to change is the attitude in this country is if you're trying to get reelected within the next 2 years, you're not going to be looking further ahead. And my wife's from Norway, and we're just back from visiting her family. One of the highest standards of living in the world. They have their own oil, which they're going to have for a certain amount of time. It's been relatively recent. $11 a gallon. And then the whole story of the social services they get and how happy everybody is, it seems, is, a whole different discussion. But it seems to me that we certainly should be world leaders, and it's going to be, good for the economy, for international public relations, if we really got on board and had a lot more to do with what we can do, which is to be leaders in the renewable energy field and global environment. And we as architects certainly can be a big part of that.
I think the
We should play a
short-term
role.
versus long-term thinking is critical. I mean, I was thinking about this recently, and it affects not only politics, because politicians have to get elected all the time, so they're thinking short-term, but businesses as well. Businesses are no longer investing in R&D the way they used to. They're not
Right.
investing or thinking about, well, what do we have to do today to make things work 5 years from now? Because the people who are running these companies are thinking, how do I bring the biggest bang to the shareholder within the next
Right.
2 to 3 quarters? I mean, 2 years down the line is long-term thinking for them. And it's affected the country. We're not investing in high-speed rail. We're not investing in big infrastructure projects anymore. I mean, especially at a time now when we need the jobs, we need the employment. I mean, in the Great
It could
Depression,
be the equivalent of the WPA project.
right, I mean,
Yeah.
in the 30s, they built all the infrastructure that we're still using now.
Right. So that's what I see as an international challenge that's bigger than probably we've ever faced. And what can we do to be a better part of it?
So Charles, if we made you king, what would you change?
No, I don't know. I do play the lottery every day. Well, I don't even know how to answer that, but I don't know. I've actually found this pretty interesting today, just thinking about sort of all the nuances of this, and I'm intrigued that there are federal agencies that might actually help us. Skeptical,
We can do it.
but optimistic.
Test them out.
Yeah.
Try it. Can't hurt.
I think the thing that today that I do find interesting is thinking more about, creating a very relevant architecture if indeed you're exporting design services, which I think that's the thing we'll probably be looking at a little bit more.
And that's
That kind of hit home today, just as a topic. Camp we did out in Wyoming many years ago for a foundation that brought kids in from the inner city of LA, and they would go there. And one night I was there during the summer, and all the kids were there, and we were all sitting around a campfire, and they had this tradition by that point where a kid would stand up, one of the students would stand up and give what they called camp kudos, and it would go around, and it would be for something someone did that day, and they gave camp kudos to the architecture and for the architect having made something, and that is such an unusual experience here. So to think that you might be in a different context where architecture really is perceived as a gift that can change things, is pretty interesting.
Tom?
Well, being the outsider guy here, yeah.
Tom,
That's
put
often
the camera
best.
on you.
Oh, should I turn this on me now? Yeah. Well, it's been very interesting. I mean, one of the things I like about my job, and the reason I kind of went into this work of video documentation, is I learned stuff, and I've been learning a lot today, and it's valuable stuff, and I really I'm just I'm glad to be here and be am hopeful for combining my skills with communicating your message, you know, in whatever way that takes shape. But it's exciting.
Good. Melissa?
Well, I look forward to helping more companies look for opportunities overseas through the government.
Even designers, even lowly designers.
We can help anybody. We want to help even.
Middle challenge.
And
Let
boy,
us
do they need a
try.
lot of help.
Give us the challenge, we'll take it on. So I look forward to that. I look forward to working with you guys for November, for hoping to bring together a good panel in Columbia. I look forward to all of that. And
Well, you can work with Tom on that day to try to put together the video conference.
yeah, if you have free services, because the government has no budget.
Oh, sure. Hey, that's my specialty. Yeah,
Everyone is totally broke.
yeah.
But I think in some ways that is a big challenge. I mean, how do we do important things with fewer resources? Both, energy resources, but also financial resources. And, maybe that's the challenge of the 21st century. Not only fewer resources, so less input, but also less output. So less waste, less pollution, and that's an amazing challenge, a design challenge, an economic challenge, a social challenge, and that would be pretty interesting.
I'd like to see some more bridges developed.
Yeah.
Not just either end of the bridge, but the bridge, and watch it go interactively. It's there, and we certainly have the technology to do it now. It's not that as if you have to be in travel all the time. You invest a lot of time and a lot of money in traveling. You can travel this way. And it's like Alfonso, we're looking at Alfonso's picture behind his sunglasses, but he's there, and we know it, and we can talk to him. And it's a way of making contact. But if we start this and we start working with it together, and we do have a very good matrix with the government. I know Charles thinks that we're sort of strange, but we've worked with the DOC now for 12 years, and it's been really wonderful. And the Small Business Administration, which covers all the architectural community except for the most elite and biggest architectural firms. And now it's going from covering, hopefully it is going to, whether the AIA wants this or not, going from just covering firms that are dealing with, what is it, under $5 million a year, up to $19 million a year, which includes about 80 to 90% of the architectural community. But it brings it all under one roof and allows us to develop within the industry and not fragmenting the industry with the small firm and the medium sized to the very large firms that's different. They pretty much have their own kind of thing. But many of them have grown up through that system and therefore will cooperate with the system as it evolves. And it's a way of making the architectural industry really relevant in the policy machine, shall we say. And we may actually build up a few bridges between departments of the American government, which, as we know, sometimes you're not allowed to speak to each other because you don't have trade agreements with each other. Don't laugh, it's true.
It's a complicated world.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complicated world.
It is, yeah.
And you have to know the rules.
Yeah.
You have to know the rules, even if you want to break the rules, you have to know what the rules
Right,
are.
you have to know what they
to
are.
begin with.
That's what happened with Haiti, because remember we couldn't get into Haiti because we didn't have an agreement with the State Department that allowed it to happen. Bill, you might drop that by the State Department. But no, it's I'd like to see bridges develop. Bill?
I guess I'd, at this point, caution against overgeneralization. I think after 20 years of schlepping around the world, one of the major observations from my own career is that it becomes necessary at some point as you go along to say, okay, I've got to begin narrowing my focus and specializing more. I think, particularly from the standpoint of the idea that we've got these technologies that link everybody and, are sort of somehow thought to be instantaneous, operate the theory, or that the technology is universal, or that somehow the communication is universal, and that the type of a building solution that we use in one place is sort of exportable and can be sort of replicated in lots of places. And my own experience is that that ain't true. And I think certainly the planning profession is becoming more and more used to the idea that one urban center is not the same as another, despite the fact that the problems of every urban center are, sewer, water, sidewalks, transportation, buses, or cars, etc. But the sort of the fact that we operate in social milieu, the fact that we operate in places with different histories, the fact that we operate in places with different climates, and therefore over history people have had different solutions to problems in the way they organize themselves, really fragments the world. And I did my first overseas project when I was still working for the city of New York back in 1991. I went to China, and I subsequently went to China about 14 times during the 90s. And finally, around 2001, I made my last trip to China. And at that point, I was actually getting quite a bit of work, and was getting calls from Chinese clients, etc. And I finally made the decision that no, I'm not going to China anymore. Because you reach a point where you are working with a certain set of clients where you say to yourself, all right, I've got to invest time and effort into learning some language, into really understanding the culture, into really knowing what's the difference between Shanghai and Beijing and Tianjin and somewhere else, and how does that matter? And at that point, I was 55 years old or whatever, and I said, there isn't time, effort, and luxury of my brain doesn't operate on that plane anymore, and I certainly am not going to be able to do this. So I sort of said, okay, no more work in China. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your thinking of me, but I can't. The other point, I read in the Financial Times had a very interesting editorial last week. They said something to the effect that we have to start thinking of the idea that perhaps the assumption we make about America's expertise in design, in creativity, in problem solution solving. And that's the level of jobs we're going to keep in the United States while everybody else is sort of doing the grunt work. That model may not stand the test of time. And that in fact, it may be that the world's preference for American design and American retailing and American sort of creative services is really a function of the fact that we've been the economic power and the military power. And then when the power wanes, this sort of interest in the American brand is going to wane along with it. And I thought, unfortunately, there's a lot of truth to what was in that editorial. We could take issue, I think, with a lot of the sort of details of it. But that's something we really need to sort of focus in on as economists and as people thinking about our place in the world and what does the United States have to offer in terms of the services and goods and products that it's going to continue providing to the world in terms of export. I've seen it very much just the last 5-6 years that I've been in. From the time we got there 6 years ago and got started, sort of interested young people and the attention of the ministries and the attention of the press and the population in general. The fact that during the period of time we've been there, trying to do a series of construction projects involving ports, involving some courts, which have run into enormous numbers of delays and issues and environmental questions, etc. At the same time, we've been there and have not been able in 6 years to complete the 8 court houses that were part of the project. The Chinese have come in, starting about 2006 after us, have built a series of highways, overpass, and an enormous construction project that sort of started the day they hit the ground and got itself done. I know my Beninese colleagues sort of, they're watching and they're comparing, and despite the fact that the Chinese project has been done in what to our point of view is a bad way, in that no environmental review and sort of come in and push the people off the right of way and very little public participation and all of the good sort of stuff that goes along with a World Bank or an international project. Nevertheless, it's sort of the finished product.
They're getting it done, yeah.
Compare the two.
Nevertheless,
people
they're exporting the minerals.
People are thinking, and there's a sort of a sea change going on in a country like Benin in terms of their observation. So I'm a bit of a pessimist at this point. That's enough.
I actually think you raise a really interesting point, though, this sort of hegemony we used to have about art, creativity, and so forth. I was talking with a friend of mine who consults to organizations all around the world, and he had just finished doing a big consulting job in China, and he said, it was quite interesting because the stereotype of, Chinese, they're very good at, crunching the numbers, but they're not creative. He says, what an utter bunch of BS. That's just blatantly not true. And his theory is, a few more years we'll be, exporting talent but that's going to be over very soon, in his opinion. On the other hand, Buick was the best-selling car in China.
And China's a big country.
Yeah.
And there's some really extremely talented young Chinese architects now, many of whom studied in the U.S. or England or Australia, went back. But there's also there's so much happening there that I think 30 years from now, there'll still be lots of opportunities for American architects. I mean, you raise an interesting point about sort of creativity and when the hard power of a country starts slipping, less economic, political, military. I mean, it's interesting to look at Japan, where their economic and their sort of political authority has waned. And there's this guy I know, Douglas McRae, who wrote an article, I guess it was about 8 years ago, called Japan's Gross National Cool. And he was saying, and he sort of charted, Japan's loss of hard power. And he said, while it's lost its hard power in the world, its soft power has actually gone up. And this was looking mostly at the last 10 years. And, Japanese design, anime, food, all sorts of soft stuff actually became more popular around the world.
That really worries me because I don't know if we have any soft stuff.
Yeah, really.
Right here.
What's that, Burger King?
Obesity.
Yeah.
We are exporting obesity.
That's our main world.
Laziness and obesity.
Yeah.
I think in that context, if someone is a professional or a particular firm, what I said before, the necessity of sort of choosing your milieu and becoming the real expert and really understanding a place and saying, okay, I want to work in Northern South America. Colombia, Venezuela. This is the region that I'm going to concentrate in. Being able to go there and do some really good work, really understand what's happening, and deliver a product that's going to be perceived as something that, yeah, this guy really knows what he's doing in our context and is offering something. In that that's the way you solve the problem of this dilemma that I stated, where my African friends are sort of observing. This is one model, this is another model. We're not sure which one we're going to follow at this point. Whereas if I'm a good, solid professional, I've made a commitment to working in that area. Elsewhere in the world, the personal contact is the way it works. So they need to see your face. They need to be familiar with you. They need to, understand that this is somebody who's got a long-term commitment to my area and my city and my urban whatever.
Well, I think that's what we've tried to develop with this thing with the charrette idea. Our charrette idea, charrette studio is one thing, and we just use we use this method. We use as much visual as possible, whether it's video conferencing, whether it's Skype, where it is. Therefore, then we can set this thing up. It's face-to-face. It's yet at a distance, but it's still face-to-face. You can still look at that person in the eye, and you can watch their body language. You can watch their reaction. That's one way of doing it without traveling around the world. But it's a sort of a simple way, and it's a beginning way, though.
Yep.
And I think it has to be done. But a lot of those really top architects you're finding over there were here, and we sort of ignored them when they graduated from our schools. And therefore, they've created their own world over there, and they sort of resent us because now they can ignore us. And it's a sad kind of thing.
I'm still surprised at how welcoming people in other countries still are to America. For all of our faults, for all of our military, excursions everywhere in the world, and our arrogance and all sorts of stuff. I mean, I'm always surprised. People in most countries still welcome Americans and even American ideas. And it's still something that is seen as having value. And I think it's important for us to make sure that they still value that in the future.
Exactly.
And that we don't take it for granted. And I think, sometimes when you start losing a little bit of economic power, that actually can make you, forces you to be quicker on your toes and to be more sensitive to what's going on. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. A little bit of loss of hard power forces you to be more creative and think a little sharper and listen a little bit more. And that might not be a bad thing.
And what do you think about the organizational context? So what kind of bridge is the AIA going to and the BSA going to reach out for?
Well, certainly, we're going to try and leverage the new technology tools we have here on the BSA side to help the international community stay connected among yourselves, but then try and reconnect with AIA National and see if we can build a better bridge there, but also to reconnect the international community with some of the other committees and find the common ground among the different committees. And that's sort of a focus that the board is talking about this year anyway, that the committees to a large extent are the real sort of intellectual engine of the organization, and that's where a lot of people are participating at the grassroots level, but too often in isolation from each other. So we want to try and connect the dots and help the members be more aware of what other people are doing so that they can find opportunities within this network, and then of course branched out larger.
This is one of the reasons why we've made our transcripts PDF available to anyone, and now with the website being on there, so now people can find out who we are and what we do and become involved. And the thing that was really important, I think, was last year at the Build Boston, we had our conference, and we put a microphone right in the middle of the room where anyone could participate in the conversation. And it was amazing how suddenly people were paying attention to them. Their idea was important, their communication was important. And the energy in that room was incredible, don't you think, Cliff?
Yeah.
I mean, it was really something. We were on Friday afternoon, and the last one, the last conference of the thing, that 40 people came, 40 people stayed there, and 40 people were involved. And I thought that was truly fantastic. And you saw that in their reaction to the conference as they wrote in their comments and how many people wanted to be involved. I think it's wonderful. But even if they're only involved by reading what we do on the website or getting that PDF file, I still feel that they're involved and they're benefiting from what we do.
Right. And that's, one of the major goals of the BSA is to kind of be that venue where that kind of information can be shared. Because there's no way you're going to be able to go one by one, all the architects,
No.
all the firms, in the region. But if we can make it available in a centralized way, people can make use of it as needed and,
Right.
and as available, and participate, in person if they want.
Mhm.
But it also has the broader reach. I mean, we do get visitors on our website from all over the place, and people signing up for mailing lists from around the world.
Mhm.
So.
Well, I think it's terrific, and we're very happy to open that door. And talking about governments again, this is one thing I should bring up because of last year. John Joyce, who heads the Small Business Administration here, has been involved with this meeting for 2 years. And the first year he came and he listened, and the second year he came with a solution. And I think it was wonderful because it shows that we are being paid attention to. They are involved with us. And if we're interesting enough here that they can see that the ideas that are going on around this table or other tables here are, it shows the quality of who they're dealing with. And they will reach out and they will work with us more easily than if we're just, all we want to hear is what they're, this the propaganda from the particular agency. And it took us about 3 years to get through the DOC that's what we wanted, but it worked. But with ours, it's made available to everyone. It's not only what we do here. And I think if Alfonso is still, Alfonso, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Hey.
Wow.
We're impressed.
That is
We
impressive.
are very
yes.
impressed.
Not really.
Would you like to say what you would like to see happen?
I would like to see really the end of the bridge, really something can come out of here, not only for Colombians to be able to eventually do something here from there, and for us to put a foot in the country. I mean, especially from the point of view of my profession, it's a dream of mine to be able, someday to do something there. It would be fantastic if this is the beginning, to get that sort of bridge.
Good.
I'm not 100% optimistic that it will happen, but,
We'll be working with you, Alfonso. And you will hear from Melissa. You will hear from several of us about that. But let's all try to work together and build the community for it. And I think it's 10 minutes to 4, and I think it's time for everyone to run home.
Anyway, thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alfonso, for letting us try